tool did a good job, but if you're going to bother hardening it, like, at least make it fun for the guy who's going to be looking at it. This is nonsense. So undetectable, again, not the real tool name. This was someone who touted on his cheat and hack forum that he had come up with a way that he could manipulate the client in such a way that it would be 100% undetectable. There's no way that any of the engineers could ever figure out that you were running his hack, except that all it did was register as a debugger. For anybody who's not familiar, there's a goddamn API call to tell when you're attached to a debugger. So we, having fun, decided that we would let him continue development and let him continue to make this claim, and actually watch him as he logged on and in the different and interesting ways he would crash his client. So once he had distributed the latest version of his tool and he said, "You're absolutely undetectable. I've been running it for weeks and months. They're not catching me at all." We would let him distribute it for a week, and then we'd ban everybody that used it. And then this one guy is sitting there, "I'm totally undetectable. I don't know how you got caught." No, we know. We just also know you're the tool developer. And so eventually you go through a couple cycles of this where he says, okay, well, I changed something. Don't worry. You're undetectable again. Let him distribute it. Everybody gets banned. People stop going to his site and downloading his tool. It was actually pretty effective. Thanks. So what are some of the mechanisms you're going to have to look out for when you inevitably decide you want to go home and write a hack for your favorite online game? Memory checksums. If you've ever tried to poke memory in a Warcraft client, you'll know that it won't even let you log on if you've modified it. I promise you, the trick of logging on and then modifying it, and it seems to be okay, they're watching. But who cares? Timing. When you're in a debugger, anything gets paused or stopped for a... did you bring enough to share, sir? No? Okay. In the future, please. Timing. So looking at the differential between any two API calls, if there's a debugger sitting in the middle, like if somebody has int3'd in the middle of that, you're going to be able to notice that it took a second and a half instead of the normal millisecond and a half between said API calls. These are pretty easily detectable when you're looking for them. Get tick count is not usually used for a whole lot of other things. Anti-debugging measures, just crashing or closing in totally random nonsense ways when you detect that there is a debugger. Cheat detection shouldn't stop the cheat. If you want to actually be effective at catching the person that's doing it, you let them do it. You let them actually develop their tool, watch what they're doing, and then figure out a new and interesting way to make their life extremely difficult. My favorite is the now industry standard of you never store pointers to strings that appear on the screen directly on your data structures. And the obvious reason for that is when I am looking for a toehold in a data structure that's somewhere in this 700 megabyte heap, I look for things that I see on my screen. Maybe it's my character name, maybe it's the name of an item, that sort of thing. Well, they would actually store pointers to pointers to pointers, or just pointers, and essentially causing it to be incredibly difficult to work backward from the string to the original data structure when you're just in this morass of nonsense. And then actually managing your bottom line as it regards cheats is just effective PR. Tell people what's going on. The players will understand. Well, some of them will. But I mean, there's always the troll. And then be quick in your turnaround once you've announced that there's an issue. You need to be agile. The one thing gamers aren't is patient. So, you can take the route Blizzard took to mitigate things. Write your own goddamn rootkit. This is actually pretty effective at spotting apps that they know they're looking for. It's the Warden. If anybody's not familiar with it, Hoagland has actually done a pretty good write-up on it a couple of years ago. It's changed since then, but it's still in the right area. Then there are gameplay workarounds for impossible problems. There is no way that you can write a client where you can update state when someone whips their view around to look behind them in a 180, send them that information on demand, have it arrive in a timely manner, and continue processing, and thus obfuscating things that they should not be able to see on their screen. People write tools that will snarf the data for all of the surrounding characters and objects and display it on a radar. Well, how do you stop that if you have to send the data? Give everybody radar, level the playing field. Sure, it removes immersion, but it also means you don't have cheaters actually winning all the time. It doesn't become a mandatory thing to do to win at your favorite game. And then psychological warfare. Like I said before, leave the developers alone, ban their users. Their users will abandon them. So how can the very stressed, already overworked, underscheduled industry improve? Power assist, source analysis. There are open source, there are academically provided, there are commercial tools for source analysis that would catch a whole bevy of really stupid shit that I found manually, and I'm sure I missed other stuff in my hurry to scroll things down on a piece of paper. Basic fuzzing, it's worth it. Internal red teaming. As you develop a security staff, they need stuff to do when they're not responding to incidents. Be proactive. Educate the remainder of your developer base. At least get them in the habit of using secure APIs. Stir and copy where you provide a strlen of the incoming string does not actually do anything for you, and it would be great if way more people understood that. But it says I can't use stir copy. And can I at least get somebody to write up a decent threat model for an online game? Like, no, they just don't even, they can't conceive of all of the things that have been going wrong for other people for the last decade because they just haven't had to worry about it until very recently. And then balancing code quality and release time. Realize that when there is a large-scale exploit, it actually will alienate your user base. And ultimately, your user base are the people that continue to decide to pay you $15 every month for making their monitor look the way they want it to look. Ultimately, it's entertainment dollars, and people will spend them elsewhere if they're not having fun anymore. So, why want to get better? Mostly because it's actually way cheaper to have CSRs fix the things that result from hacks than to actually close all the vectors. This remains true in other industries, I imagine, but it's definitely true in an industry where people will beg and practically work for free to be CSRs. And these are, you might be, qualified at something else, but choose to work in a game position, and so they'll take their $10 an hour pay. The bad news is that even if you beef up your introspection of your own code, you have people dedicated to red teaming and fuzzing, there may not actually be anything there to find. There probably is, but there may not be. And so you have no quantifiable result to pass on to a board that's reviewing your expenses. Why did I give you all this money to review this code? You didn't even find anything. I guess we're just really good at writing code. And then measuring the true cost of lost reputation is actually really difficult. And there's not a whole lot of awareness, and there's no good formula for figuring out how much getting owned actually hurts you. And, of course, if you have cheaters, that means you can ban them and then say you banned them, and everyone rejoices. Because even if you were to tell everyone, hey guys, there are no cheaters, we've stamped them all out, no one's going to believe you because the guy that just beat them is obviously cheating. So, there's also the principle that there's no such thing as bad press. This is especially true, I don't know if anybody in here actually plays Warhammer, but if you do, you probably had your checking account or credit card billed to about 0 a couple months ago. This was all over gaming news, and it turned out that this giant snafu with the credit card processor, it wasn't our fault, was not actually our fault, it was the credit card processor. This giant snafu actually resulted in more subscribers as people, thank you very much, as people heard about it, read it in their favorite gaming news websites. They said, hey, I meant to try out that Warhammer gamer. Man, I should really resub. And our sub numbers went up. When in fact we had seriously just billed people thousands of dollars and took 4 days to get it back to them. So, yeah. So, last slide, which is good because I was just told I have 10 minutes. I lied. There are shout-outs. Yeah, camera guy's really happy that we're done. He wants to go home and drink. I just want to say, you guys right here in the front row, the guys that couldn't be here, Kinshoto, the guys who helped me run CTF, help me. We all ran it as a team. You're awesome. Yes, fuck you too. Nurse Betty, that's the hot blonde up here. She's put up with my shit all weekend. You'll see her on the way out, I promise. DETech, you guys have done an awesome job taking over for us. I don't even know if they're in here, if any of them are here, but they've done an awesome job. If you see them, congratulate them. They are finally seeing how much work it is to run CTF, and I hope they stick through it. Don't break our record, but you know, go another year or two. And then the goons, you guys have been really, really awesome with me this weekend, especially you guys running around at the last minute trying to find me adapters and getting me set up with all this shit. I'm an idiot. I fail logistics just like every other nerd. So that's it for me, though. Does anybody have any questions before we have to give up the room for closing ceremonies? Not a one. Oh, one right here. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, right here in the blonde. No, to be honest, I'm, what's that? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, the question was whether or not I was aware of RSA dump and whether I'd looked into it at all. Does that sum up your question? Oh, you say dongle? Yeah, well, so that would, yeah, okay, so just like Blizzard is doing with their Real ID program, they're sending out their dongles. Okay, so the question was, had I heard of RSA dongles and had we looked into them? The problem is the expense. Yeah, so they are getting cheaper, except for when you have unless you're willing to immediately pass that upfront cost onto the customer, or you have some assurance that they're going to continue for a while, it's tough to make that argument with bean counters. Because like I said, it's actually, to them, it's cheaper. They're paying those CSRs to do their job anyway. And if we need one more, sure, let's just get him for another 20 grand a year, as opposed to that. I agree. I think that's actually a good solution, and I bet customers would be happy for it, but I don't see it actually happening because it's an actual upfront cost, which is the one thing that game companies actually despise. If you can avoid upfront costs, it's the way to go. So I'm sorry, you had one right here? No, behind you. With, I'm sorry? So I was asked if I was affiliated with DFC. I was not, actually. I'm sorry. She looks so disappointed. Yeah, right here.
Okay, we want an honest answer. How much of the anti-cheat extra work, or how much is this a factor as to, say, producing a Linux client?
Okay, so I was just asked, all the extra time you spend on anti-cheat stuff, how does that equate to, or how does that compare to the work to make a Linux client? And would an open source kernel change that? So the answer to that is, where I was, we did both. We used transgaming to do our ports. And essentially what they do is they shim DirectX and some of the APIs if you're not familiar with it. So to be honest, in terms of actual effort, the port was way easier because transgaming, they essentially get a small cut and they do all the work and we just make sure it isn't broken. So we used our QA resources and their dev time. So anybody that's not making a Linux port just doesn't want to give up a cut to transgaming. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, how much impact on developer workflow do the anti-circumvention measures have?
So the question was, how much does it affect developer workflow when actually working with these anti-cheat mechanisms? And the answer is, in debug mode, none at all. When you actually have symbols emitted, you've got everything macroed out that's done a lot of this stuff. In actual, like in the case where something only happens in release, it's a giant bitch. Yeah, that sort of stuff actually does get done with like C preprocessor foo. So in debug mode, you're totally fine. Like you don't even notice it, and it's macros used to access it, or they'll be wrapped in C++ wrapper classes, that sort of thing. Anyone else? Oh, right here.
How often do you see people actually trying to attack the protocol on the server, trying to attack the server through the legitimate protocol, as opposed to trying to get something out of the server by using the protocol the way
So the question was, yeah, finally got it this time. The question